I see quorum. It's 3:30. We have Minister Blair with us, and I'm sure he will introduce the folks that are with him. Minister Blair, you have 5 minutes for your opening statement, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and once again, thank you to the committee for the opportunity to discuss our supplementary estimates B for the Department of National Defence, the Canadian Armed Forces, and the Communications Security Establishment. In the interest of time, Mr. Chair, I won't introduce all of the officials that are joined here today, and I understand that this committee will have an opportunity to spend some time with them after I've completed my appearance. But if I may, I'd like to point out that I'm joined today by General Allen, Vice Chief of the Defence Staff, Deputy Minister Bill Matthews, and of course Chief Carolyn Xavier from CSE. Other officials, I apologize, and I will introduce them as they come forward. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, and you are as determined as I to ensure that our people have what they need to do the difficult and demanding jobs that we ask of them. And today I come before you requesting an additional $1.5 billion to fund our defense priorities. We are also seeking $15.2 million for the Communications Security Establishment, most of which will be directed towards ongoing operations of the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. These funds will bolster CSE's ability to act against malicious cyber actors working to take advantage of Canadians. And this will also bring CSE's 2023-24 total budgetary authorities to just over $1 billion for the first time in the agency's history. For national defense, the supplementary estimates include mostly routine or anticipated requirements, and as such, I will endeavor to limit myself to a brief overview of some of these items and how they support us in defending our nation and supporting our people. To begin with, I'll reiterate that our number one priority will always be the men and women of the Canadian Armed Forces and to the Department of National Defence, and this is reflected in these estimates, with over a third of the ask going towards compensation and benefits for military members. This is in line with increases that were negotiated earlier this year through collective bargaining for public servants. We are also accessing reprofiled funds totaling $151.4 million for the Hyder-Beatty and LGBT Purge Class Action Settlement Agreements. These funds will compensate members who have been affected by sexual misconduct and discrimination and hopefully provide closure and promote healing for those members. I will not belabor the importance of fair compensation for our people in uniform or of creating a modern and inclusive work environment where all members of the defense team feel protected, supported, and respected. I believe that's well appreciated by the members of this committee. It was very clear when I was with you before 2 weeks ago that you understood the difficulties that are faced by CAF in terms of recruitment and retention. And I believe you are all in agreement that we must do everything in our power to ensure the CAF remains a viable and attractive career option for existing and prospective members. And because in an evolving threat environment, we need a robust, ready, and resilient workforce that can meet the complex and rapidly evolving challenges that we're facing, these efforts become extremely important. At our last appearance, we had the opportunity to speak about the dramatic increase in domestic deployments and the high demand for CAF support in responding to natural disasters. We also need to strengthen Arctic security and to modernize NORAD, and not to mention the many obligations to our allies and partners as we seek to advance peace and stability around the world and to defend the rules-based international order, which is being continually challenged. The additional funds we are requesting will help us to meet these demands, whether it's the $550 million to support Ukraine through military aid and OP Unifier, the $119 million we're requesting to expand our NATO contribution program and establish the North American Regional Office for Diana, which is NATO's new Defense Innovation Accelerator for the North Atlantic program located in Halifax, or the $30 million in transfers to other organizations to help with defense-related issues and priorities. As one of the largest departments, the National Defense is 100% committed to responsible stewardship of public funds while delivering the best results possible for Canadians. These estimates, I hope you will see as evidence of that commitment. I want to thank you, and I'm now happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Minister. With that, We'll start our 6-minute round. Mr. Bazan, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank the Minister and officials for being here. It's been 8 years, and we've seen $10 billion in money that was supposed to be spent on our Canadian Armed Forces lapse and not get the equipment that we need on time. We know that you're cutting $1 billion from the budget right now. And you look at where you projected your SSE spending to be at, it's $25 billion under where it's supposed to be at by this point in time. This year alone, you're underspending SSE by $6 billion. And, you know, that really talks to the underinvestment in our Canadian Armed Forces. We just all saw the video from Admiral Topshee talking about the condition of our Navy. It's going to be another 15 years just to replace our frigates. That we've got these new AOPs, but we only can take one out at a time because we don't have enough sailors to man them. So something's got to give. So, Minister, I'm wondering, can you tell us, are we pulling out of the Indo-Pacific with our frigates if we don't have enough manpower? Are we no longer going to participate in the Maritime Task Force under NATO?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me just speak to, if I may, Admiral Topshee's video, which I think was frank and very important explanation of where the Royal Canadian Navy finds itself currently. We have already committed significant resources to replenishing our fleet. The Harvard-class frigates are coming to the end of their life, and we have undertaken contracts to replace the Arctic patrol ships and the surface combatant ships, but it's going to take time for them to be delivered. And Admiral Topshee expressed his concern about the need to continue to maintain the Harvard-class ships and to ensure that we have the personnel that we need to staff them as they undertake the important missions to which they are assigned.
So the Navy aside, we know the condition of it, and we should be getting ships built quicker, and we're going to be waiting 15 years to replace the Halifax-class frigates. The RUSI report, the Royal United Service Institute, came up with their report on the Canadian Air Force fighter jets, and they're saying we're down to 56 pilots, that we cannot maintain to operate a NORAD and NATO mission. One of your predecessors, Mr. Sajan, went out there and bought a bunch of used Australian fighter jets. We got 88 aircraft supposedly, but we don't have the pilots to fly them. Are we going to be withdrawing from NATO and doing any air policing?
And if I may, as you're well aware, we have entered into a contract for the delivery of 88 of the F-35s. Just last week, we also announced the procurement of up to 16 new P-8s for multi-mission aircraft. In my conversations with General Kenny, he's been very clear that the acquisition of these new aircrafts, both the multi-mission and the new fighter aircrafts, really creates an opportunity for him to turn around the challenge that they have faced in recruiting and training new pilots. It's an expensive proposition. We talked about the cost of training these pilots, but we remain committed to it. We are acquiring the aircraft that the Royal Canadian Air Force needs, and those newly acquired aircraft will create new opportunities for us to meet our recruitment, training, and retention goals. And no, we are not withdrawing from any missions. And in fact, Mr. Bevan, I believe sincerely these new acquisitions are going to enable us to fulfill our NATO commitments and to do the important missions that we are obliged to do.
But we also know that we're not getting the F-35 fleet in full operation until 2032. So we don't have the pilots for the CF-18s. We know that the training in Canada has been wound up, that we're going to be relying on the United States to train our pilots, and they have a backlog of their own pilots plus other allies to get through their own system. So we aren't going to be able to address the pilot shortage quickly enough to deal with the threats. The war is not going to wait for us if things continue to escalate on the global scene.
I would always invite General Kennedy to speak for himself, but he has assured me that they continue to be able to be fully operational with our fleet of F-18s, and they will continue to support that fleet until the delivery of the new F-35s. It is not without its challenges, and I think this committee in particular has canvassed the issue of recruitment and retention of the very best and the brightest that the Canadian Armed Forces needs. We're making investments in the Air Force. We're making investments in the platforms, but also in the training and equipment, the maintenance and supply for the Armed Forces. I look at the
supplemental estimates, and I look at the budget, and I look at the economic update from a couple of weeks ago. There appears to be $1.5 billion less in it for Ukraine and for Operation Reassurance. So are we backing off on our support for Ukraine? Because it's definitely less money than what we've given them in military aid.
That's an extraordinary question coming from you, Mr.
Well, I want to see more.
What's that?
And I want to see more, but we're seeing actually a reduction.
Well, and you'll have every opportunity to continue to support more, because that is the work that we are doing. Canada has so far committed $2.4 billion of aid to Ukraine, and we've been delivering on those commitments. Our most recent announcement was for 50 additional LAFs and medical armored medical vehicles for Ukraine, and we're working very closely with GDLS in London to ensure that the production of that is accelerated and those vehicles will be delivered as quickly as possible to Ukraine. But there has been no abatement or easing of our commitment to Ukraine, and we have been continuing to deliver. As a matter of fact, just about a week and a half ago, I announced the delivery of nearly 11 million rounds of ammunition to Ukraine, also with assault weapons and other winter equipment that Ukraine said they needed from us. When they ask, we deliver.
Mr. Brazan. Mr. Fisher, 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister Blair, Major General, for being here, Deputy Minister, and to you and the rest of your team. Thank you all for being here again at committee. Minister, Conservatives are known for calling Atlantic Canada a culture of defeat. But let me tell you, and I know you know this, and let me tell everybody in this committee that Atlantic Canada is a culture of innovation. For example, in my riding of Dartmouth Cole Harbour, it's home to an established and growing defence research and development industry. Minister, bringing NATO's Defence Innovative Accelerator for the North Atlantic, as we know it as Diana, to our municipality is going to be a real benefit to its growth. But I also know that these incredible researchers and innovators are going to be a real benefit to NATO as well. So I see in the supplementary estimates, they include $30.1 million over 4 years, starting in 23-24, and $10 million in ongoing funding for Diana's establishment in our municipality. Now, I understand that the Conservatives are going to vote against this, which is a bit of a shock. But can you give us a better idea of the timeline for establishing Diana? And could you speak also a little bit more about maybe how this supports NATO's efforts as well?
We have already committed the money, and it's in the estimates, but we've actually standing up the operation of Diana even now. We've just recently concluded a competition, if you will, where we had applicants from all over the NATO countries to participate in new innovations and projects for Diana. 7 Canadian companies have been successful in that process. So we are moving ahead, and you know, I think there's a great opportunity for here, and you know, there are Diana offices in I believe in Estonia and in London, and now in Canada, being located in Halifax. This is not just a Canadian center. This is going to be the center for North America, and I think it's a huge opportunity for us to connect innovators and industry to Canadian, not just Canadian military, but to create real opportunities for Canadian industry right across the NATO country. It's going to have the effect of improving innovation and moving forward in NATO capabilities to respond to the threat that our adversaries represent.
Thank you very much, Minister.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Ministre.
See supplementary estimates. That means that the Conservatives are going to vote against support for NATO. They're going to vote again against supporting Ukraine, and they'll be voting against. Also, I see in the supplementaries, better wages for Canadian Armed Forces members. So we expect an awful lot from our CAF members. They're doing incredible and important work here at home and abroad, and they deserve to be paid. And this committee agrees that they deserve to be well paid for the work that they do. And I can tell you that from what I've been hearing, it hasn't been enough, that wages haven't necessarily been keeping up. That being said, I'm glad to see in the estimates wage increases for CAF members. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about these increases, how they will be implemented, when they'll be implemented, and maybe specifically, you know, how they're going to benefit some of the lower paid ranks.
I'm going to be careful here, Mr. Fisher, because the precise details of this contract, because there are many people that were impacted by the negotiated settlements, both through the public service and through CAF. But my understanding is that this has resulted in wage increases between 8 and 10% for members of the Canadian Armed Forces, which is not insignificant. There are other investments that we have to make in health services, in housing services, in making available child care. All of those investments are also part of how we're attempting to support the reconstitution. But fair wages and fair compensation for the men and women who serve in both our regular forces and in the reserve is really important. These were very much in line with the settlements that were negotiated through the Public Service and through Treasury Board for the broader public service, but it maintains a level of parity for members of the Canadian Armed Forces.
So, do I have much time left? 2 minutes? So, I wonder whether you could just talk a little bit about. I want to sort of talk a little bit more about wages. Again, we have conversations at this committee on a regular basis, and all the members seem to, and especially the opposition. The Conservatives will often talk about how they feel that we're not doing enough. I can't cross that T and dot that I when they talk about not doing enough, and then to see them stand up and vote against the things that we are trying to do for our Canadian Forces members. And it saddens me. And it shocks me that someone would say one thing, that a party would say that they support our armed forces, and then vote against the things that you're putting on the table, you and your team today. I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, Mr. Fisher, I'm not, without commenting on how any particular partisan position may play out or a political party may vote, I believe very strongly that we have to invest in the Canadian Armed Forces. That includes particularly investing in the men and women who serve. Fair wages and that compensation is important, but many of the other investments we are making as well. And certainly the money that the Canadian government has determined is required and is directly in response to the requests we've received from the Ukraine and from our NATO allies. I'm hopeful, and I'll just say that, I'm hopeful that this will receive the support of the House of Commons when we vote on these matters later today. I am hopeful that we'll be able to pass this legislation because the funding that for defense and for Ukraine that is in these supplementary estimates, I think is going to be really important. It's important to the men and women who serve. It's important that we continue to invest in them, that we do it carefully, and certainly the support for Ukraine. I actually believe that the vast majority of members of the House of Commons believe in, and I believe the vast majority of Canadians believe in supporting Ukraine. Ukraine is, in many ways, fighting on all of our behalf.
We're going to have to leave Mr. Fisher's
and
question.
Apparently, I've got to leave this.
Yes, you
Sorry,
do.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Blair. Minister Blair. Madame Normandin, 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being present today. I'm also going to follow in the vein of salary increases of some 883 million. We see there's an increase, but I take the example of certain compensations that are paid out. Some are going up, and we can see that 30 million is going to be saved with the replacement of other allowances. It seems to me you're increasing on the one hand and decreasing on the other in various areas. You have to take into consideration inflation, though. The rise in the cost of living, is the figure that you cite really sufficient? Does it suffice? Is it an incentive for members to stay in CAF? And do you think that will attract others?
Much for the question. And I believe that the settlement that was negotiated was a fair one and did reflect the inflationary pressures that CAF members had been experiencing previously. But we are also mindful that affordability has become a significant issue. And in the same way as we talk every day in the House of Commons about the affordability challenges Canadians are facing from coast to coast to coast, those same challenges are extended for the members of the Canadian Armed Forces. But one of the things that we have tried to do, and you mentioned, for example, that some of the funding has been shifted. And for example, we might talk about the housing supports that were available to all members. A decision was made to make those housing supports available to a broader range of people, but particularly at the lower incomes of the Canadian Armed Forces, providing the same level of benefit to those who make very high salaries, as that might have been supplied to those who make very low salaries, didn't seem to be an issue of fairness. The people who made less needed more help, and so we've made some changes to enable them to do that. But we also realized that the impact of that change could be pretty significant for somebody just to suddenly lose a benefit, and so there was work done, I think good work done, to make sure that the introduction of those changes would be phased in over a 3-year period, so that and people are experiencing at the higher wage levels a change in their benefit, but it won't be immediately impactful because it's being phased in over a 3-year period. But I believe that this gives an opportunity. We're trying to be very careful with the money we've got, but ensuring that it is used to the best benefit to those who need it the most.
Merci beaucoup. Et je sais que...
Thank you. And I know that it wasn't you that was there when they talked about in the past, but one of the complaints was that the servicemen and women were not informed about this new approach. Another angle here with respect to defense funding. We saw that there was an increase in budgets for allied countries, NATO countries, and that has been even more true since February 2022. Given that context, would you get enough support from the population for the increase in wages for the servicemen and women rather than decreasing the budget for that purpose? I'm thinking specifically in terms of military expenses. Do you feel that people support the changes in terms of the increase in the defense budget?
As you're well aware, in 2017, the government introduced Strong, Secure, and Engaged, which is a program designed, and it involved a number of significant acquisitions, but it was an increase in defense spending over a several-year period from 2017 through the end of 2026. The plan in Strong, Secure, and Engaged was to increase defense spending by approximately 70% over that period of time. I believe there was strong public support for that because I believe very strongly that Canadians do very much value, first of all, the important role that the Canadian Armed Forces provides in maintaining the national defense, the security of our country. I know how appreciative they have been when we've called upon the Canadian Armed Forces to assist, as we talked last week when we met, in response to emergencies. And I think they do understand that Canada has international obligations to NATO, to NORAD, in the Indo-Pacific, and that there's an expectation and strong Canadian support for the Canadian Armed Forces. But we also recognize, and I think there's been lots of discussion here, that the increase in spending that we put in place and began the program of in 2017 it does not really match the new environment, the new threat environment. The world is becoming an increasingly dangerous place. And since the pandemic, with the increase in climate-related disasters, most importantly, the more adversarial and aggressive nature of Russia and China, we know that we have to do more. And I've attempted to acknowledge to this committee previously, we must do more. I think Canadians have every expectation that we'll be careful when we're spending their money. That's our job, and to do so. But I also believe very strongly that they also support continued investment in making sure that the Canadian Armed Forces have the tools they need to do the job.
We'll allocate 39 seconds to your next round then. Okay. 6 minutes, Madame Matheson.
Thank you for all being here again today. So this week, we sadly saw the new numbers come from StatsCan on the military sexual trauma issue. You've repeatedly said your commitment to enacting Justice Arbour's recommendations. Certainly this involves her 5th recommendation, but we haven't seen full measures, I think, that we need to see. And considering what came out of that StatsCan report, it's extremely worrying. Those crimes are on the increase, or the report, and certainly the reporting is on the increase, not the decrease. And I would argue that a lot of the survivors of sexual military trauma are losing quite a lot of faith in the system and the help that they need to get, considering we've seen report after report after report, and it's not getting better. So I brought forward a bill, and I've talked to you about this in committee before, to end the concurrent jurisdiction for criminal sexual offenses, because ultimately those who have started in the military justice system were shunted to the civilian court and then told that they weren't going to get their day in court and that they're in this in-between period. You have a bill before you now that I introduced, and I would like to know that you would take that bill as soon as you possibly can, which is immediately, to ensure that those survivors receive the justice that they deserve.
Yeah. Thanks very much. First of all, if I may comment on the StatsCan report on sexual misconduct in the military, I agree with you. It's a deeply concerning report. I think it's important, to reflect on the time period in which the survey was taken, which was from October 2021 to 2022. But it doesn't in any way diminish the importance of the findings in that report. And I think it is a stark reminder that the concern, that the inappropriate behavior still persists, and we have every responsibility to act and act expeditiously. We have the 48 recommendations of Justice Harbour. By the way, I would also echo the importance of your comments, the importance of meeting with survivors, advocates, and organizations. I did that even earlier today. I think that's important to continue to listen broadly. And just as an example, I know that the Canadian Armed Forces, General Carignan, has conducted interviews and consulted with almost 9,000 members of the Canadian Armed Forces, because listening to those voices is really important. I have been working very closely with our external monitor and Justice Harbour with respect to the implementation of all the recommendations. I think the signature one is of course, Rec 5. We took immediate steps in response to the issue raised by Justice Harbour by ensuring that all future sexual assault investigations were being investigated by the civilian police and adjudicated through the civilian criminal justice system. What is required is legislative reform. I want to assure you, I've got a whole team of people who are working full out on that, working closely with Justice Harbour, closely with survivor groups, consulting with the Canadian Armed Forces, with Solicitor Generals and Attorney Generals in all the provinces across the country. We're working very hard. We will bring that work back. It's complex, and I don't offer that as an excuse, but rather an explanation. We're working through the important complexity. Justice Harbour has asked of me, take the time to get this right, but keep moving, and we are moving very expeditiously on it.
So ultimately, though, what happened when those cases were moved in the middle to a civilian court system is that ultimately it ensured that they didn't have the jurisdictional capacity to deal with them. And so some of those cases were dismissed. So what this legislation would do immediately is to help to correct that from ever happening again. And you could do that right now. Like, I, too, have an incredible team that went to work to ensure that we had some legislation. You could adopt that right now.
And I've read your legislation, and frankly, it's quite clear. It's about 4 lines. There's a lot more work that needs to be done to not just simply. The legislation is going to be important, and we are working on that. I'll have more to say about that in the future. But at the same time, there's a great deal of other work that needs to be done in order to make sure that it gives effect. And I'll simply just sort of acknowledge, and we've heard this very clearly from the external monitor, from Justice Harbour, and most importantly from the victims of these types of offences, that the change that is required is not merely an event, it's a process. It's a very important iterative process that we do all of the things that are necessary to give it its true effect, which is to protect those individuals and to make sure that their cases are dealt with appropriately. And I would also, it's in addition, I think a big part of Rec 5 is to make sure that we continue to provide the supports to the survivors of sexual assault so that it's not just simply a matter of criminal investigation and proper adjudication of their complaints, but also to make sure that the supports are in place to help them recover from these offenses. Listen, I've talked to you before about my very strong desire that we'll work together on this. I remain committed to that.
Survivors have been waiting a really long time. and it's been 18 months since Arbor, so please act faster.
Yes, ma'am.
You there. Thank you. Ms. Cramp-Nyman, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, your government has done a fantastic job of standing around, claiming that it is taking steps to address the unacceptable instances of sexual harassment in our armed forces. In the past 12 months, sexual misconduct in our Canadian armed forces has doubled, and this government has failed. The political leaders of a self-described feminist government, including the Prime Minister and now 3 ministers of defense, should be ashamed of themselves in their failure to not just stem the flow of institutionalized violence against our young men and women, but being a passive and indifferent observer to its growth. Over the past 8 years, survivors and experts have been shouting from the rooftops. Justice Deschamps warned in 2015, Justice Fish warned in 2021, Justice Arbor warned in 2022. And your government's response? Cut $1 billion and establish a panel to review military colleges, a panel that your office delayed in creating because you couldn't find 7 experts. You spoke to this yesterday. The experts are the survivors, the young men and women on the receiving end of catcalls, the troops who found themselves in a darkened hallway with a drunk superior at the Christmas party, the women who were pinned up against the bulkhead of a ship and raped. The experts, Minister, are the men and women under your charge who are emotionally, mentally, and physically violated. As a mother myself, I would find it extremely difficult to justify approving my children joining your Canadian Armed Forces, an organization that has no place for them to live, not sufficient money to pay them, no equipment for them to use, all overseen by a government with no respect for their autonomy. Responsibility starts and stops with your political leadership. And after 8 years of inaction and gutting, as a new minister, you have a lot of work to do. So on top of the $1 billion cuts, Minister, why has your government, despite allegedly taken steps to address sexual misconduct, allowed instances of sexual harassment to double, Minister, in a single year in the CAF?
That was 2 minutes and 30 seconds, so you have 2 minutes and 30 seconds to respond.
Thank you very much. Let me just back up a little bit. And the report that was released by StatsCan yesterday actually involved surveys that were taken for 23,000 members of the Canadian Armed Forces between October 2021 and October 2022. Listen, I accept completely the concerns that were raised. I also want to, I think it's important, the Canadian Armed Forces is one of the only institutions in the country, one of the few in the world that actually is gathering this information and speaking to their own people. And as I mentioned earlier, General Carignan has also consulted with 9,000 members of the force on the steps that are necessary. I appreciate the partisan perspective on what has been done, but I
Excuse me, Minister, if I may. The victims that I'm speaking about, the survivors, must become victors. So what motivation do we have to retain current members and recruit future heroes if we're allowing this to happen?
Please continue.
Thank you. I would offer a slightly different perspective, and it's not mine. It's the perspective of Madam Justice Arbor, who I've spoken to a number of times on these matters, and more importantly, our external monitor, Madame Terrien, who has been given the important job of monitoring the progress on, and she's issued 2 very important reports. I'd invite members of this committee to familiarize themselves with those reports because I do think it clearly articulates the hard work and the progress that is being made. And we have now taken some very significant steps in response to those recommendations. Just yesterday, as the member indicated, we stood up a review panel for the military colleges at both at RMC in Kingston and at Saint Jean. The work and the expertise, and I would invite the members of this committee to take a good hard look at who we've appointed there.
If I may, Minister, just in the nature of time.
I'm trying to be equal in time here, so I'm going to have to let him respond.
I believe I have 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, you're down to about 20 seconds.
Okay, so my last question is, in your opening comments, Minister, you acknowledge that the priority for you is the men and women in the CAF to be respected and protected. Do you feel that's happening?
Yes, ma'am, I do. And if I may, let me go back to the thing. I'd invite the members to familiarize themselves with the work that has been done, the panel that's now been stood up. I think there's been a great deal of work to be done, and let me also acknowledge there's much more work to do. But we also, the member also asked, Ms. Krampa also asked about some of the investments that we're making in the Canadian Armed Forces. I would remind her and this committee that in 2012, Canada's expenditure on defense dropped to 1%, the lowest in our country's history. It was only passed more in 2013
Thank you,
when it
Minister.
actually fell below 1%. We've
Thank
been
you.
digging out of a very deep hole
Thank
left
you.
to us since then.
Thank you, Ms. Cramp. Now, Mr. Collins, 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And I want to take us back, Minister, to the Ukraine support that you referenced in your opening statement. You talked about the $500 million that's included in the budget and some additional supports. And of course, we know that our government has been doing and investing in many areas, and that includes support for 200,000 Canadians that have been displaced by the illegal war in Ukraine, that have made their way here to Canada. That includes the long list of sanctions that were included in the Special Economic Measures Act, and of course the previous support that we've provided in budgets since the start of the war. And one thing that I've noticed domestically is a slippage in the support for the Ukraine community and of course the Ukrainian president, his government, and his soldiers. The leader of the opposition has sent out a directive to his party to halt support for Ukraine. We noticed that recently with the Canada-Ukraine agreement that was referenced by my colleague.
Mr. Chair, that's a complete misrepresentation. We're not voting for a carbon tax. We still support Ukraine unequivocally, including giving them more weapons. And as a matter of fact, if you look at the budget here, military aid going to Ukraine has
Mr. Chair, the
declined
issue is they make
in the
comments.
next 3 years.
They can dish it out, but they can't take
This
it
is
when it
moving
comes
from a
back the
point
other
of
way.
order
So
to a-
that's the problem we have with the people on the other side of the table.
Point of order.
So be it.
Order.
Point of order.
This is not a point of order. This is a point of interruption.
No,
Mr. Collins has the floor.
Misleading
You
committee
got
is a
another
point of order. This is a point
Have
of
you
order.
got another point of order?
Yes.
What's your other point of order?
Point of order is that this member has misled the committee.
That's
That
the
is a
same point of order I've already ruled on as a point of interruption. Mr. Collins,
Thanks, Mr.
you have
Chair.
the remaining.
So, Minister, I'd like to get back to the support for Ukraine. Of course, we've done everything we can, and we're seeing slippage on the other side of the table in terms of the lack of support. I'm wondering if you could reiterate the importance of the investment that we're going to pass this evening in terms of the resources that it will provide to Ukraine, its government, its people, and its military.
Yeah, thanks very much. To take you through some of it, for example, we're requesting $49.85 million to reinforce Canadian support for Ukraine through Operation Unifier. And since, like, for the last 8 years, we've actually been able to train through Operation Unifier nearly 40,000 members of Ukrainian armed forces. And in my conversations with the defense minister from the Ukraine, he has said that training really was key to their survival in the early weeks of the war and to their continued success in fighting back the Russian illegal invasion of their country. We know that training has continued to modify. It includes such things as sapper training, for example, to deal with mines in that area. We are contributing as well. Canada's contributing fairly significantly to the F-16 training that's going to be taking place in Poland. We've been working very closely with that. In addition, the money that we have earmarked into these supplements, approximately $500 million for the Ukraine, will also enable us to provide them with the munitions that they are asking for. There's a wide range of artillery munitions and other munitions. We've also contributed and will continue to contribute financially to air defense systems for Ukraine. We are part of a number of important NATO coalitions, which is providing support to various initiatives to Ukraine. I think most importantly, we're listening to them, we're working with them, and when they ask us, when they said, for example, we're going into a winter campaign, we need winter uniforms, we need winter tents, we need warm weather clothing. They said they needed ammunition from us. They were very explicit on what they required, and we responded to their request. and we've been able to deliver it to them. And another thing I would also like to mention is Canadian Armed Forces also have brought their aircraft to bear. They're working out of Prestwick, and they have been able to transport tens of millions of pounds of material, not just from Canada, but from our allies, to get it to Ukraine, to get it to their front lines, to get it to where they need it. We're going to continue to support them in every way possible, and we're going to, that support really, it does as a result of listening to what they want. We've also, and I was just having a conversation, one of the things we've heard very clearly is the need for ammunition. By the way, I'm hearing exactly the same thing for the need for ammunition for the Canadian Armed Forces. Just today, we've now ordered more than 4 times as much ammunition for next year as this year, because we know that the Canadian Armed Forces needs it, and we know that the Ukrainians are going to need it, and we're going to make sure we've got it so that we can provide it.
Thanks. Chair, any time
You
left?
have a minute?
Oh, perfect. So, Minister, I'll turn the situation, my question to the international scene. So we're seeing the election of very right-wing conservative governments across the world and some slippage internationally for the Ukrainian community and their war against Russia. I'm wondering what efforts, what do you hear from your contemporaries in terms of what's happening in the States? We see the Republicans, much like our conservative colleagues across the table, playing political games with the Ukrainian support. Those that are supporting Trump, we're seeing the same that are across the table that are supporting the new leader of the official opposition. What are your contemporaries saying on an international stage in terms of the importance of continuing the international support effort, not just here in Canada, but internationally, the support for Ukraine, to get at some of the issues that you just talked about?
Yeah, I'm a member of the
7
Ukraine.
seconds to answer that
I'm
question.
a member of the Ukraine Contact Group. I want to assure you that among all of our NATO allies, and particularly in my conversations with Secretary of Defense Austin, his support for Ukraine and the importance of supplying Ukraine to hold back that Russian aggression and the challenge to the rules-based order remains absolutely resolute. We are concerned with some of the other noise that we're hearing, but among
thank
our
you,
allies, we're solid.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Madame Normandine, slightly over 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Minister, I'd like to come back to something you mentioned in terms of the review commission for the military colleges. If a decision is taken about that role, will it be tied to a change of culture? Has the department done any studies with respect to cost, given such a change in the role of military colleges? Have you evaluated extra expenses if you do indeed change the role of the military colleges?
I anticipate that this review panel will make significant, important recommendations to us. Madam Justice Arbour, when she made this is in direct response to recommendation 28 and 29 in the Arbour report. And when she made that recommendation, she made the observation that closing those military colleges would be a lost opportunity. I agree with that, because I think there's much benefit that can become from it, but she also clearly articulated that there needs to be significant cultural change in those institutions, because some of the behaviors and some of the experiences, particularly of women and minorities going through our military colleges, is unacceptable and needs to change. When we get the recommendations back, I don't want to speculate or deal with hypotheticals, but I am quite prepared. I think there's great value in the panel's work. The recommendations will be, I think, will be very important to us. And I will, if the recommendation is that we need to invest more in those colleges in order to effect permanent and sustainable cultural change, then I'll come looking for those resources.
So you didn't really answer my question. Those changes, will they be done on a financial basis? Has there been an assessment, a monetary evaluations of the differences that would be involved if you do change the role of the military colleges? For example, if you change the role in terms of civilian universities, yes or no? Have you assessed that type of change?
And the answer is no, that work has not yet been done. I don't have the results of the panel's work. When they come back to us with their recommendations, that assessment will take place.
Madame Normandine, Ms. Matheson, 2.5 minutes.
Recently, the CBC came out with a a report on the Canadian Armed Forces providing training and weapons to war criminals in Iraq. Canadian soldiers tried to warn their superiors in Ottawa what they were seeing. War criminals were showing them videos and bragging about gruesome torture, rape, extrajudicial killings. And then apparently an investigation was done, of which you have quoted in saying that you were supportive of, and yet it was not an independent investigation. Certainly we should ideally learn from what had occurred with the Somalia affair, and those cover-ups, that lack of transparency, that suppression of what soldiers were trying to tell superior officers. So do you see the importance of, in this case specifically, putting forward an independent investigation so that when soldiers come forward on these sort of protests against specifically training war criminals, that we can trust that there's a truly investigative process that's independent?
And actually, that isn't quite a complete explanation of everything that transpired. The actual event took place in 2018. It was investigated and dealt with at that time. The issue was then raised again, I believe, by CBC in 2021. And at that time, the Chief of Defense instructed the military police and JAG to review everything that had taken place 3 years earlier. And that was when I was asked if I had confidence that that was done appropriately and thoroughly. I said yes, because the matter had been reviewed fairly extensively in 2021. Decisions were made. There was corrective action that was taken to ensure that there was greater clarity on what everyone's responsibility was under the circumstances that had apparently transpired in 2018. And the determination was made at that time on what actions were appropriate and taken. The matter came forward again as a result of media reporting, and then I was asked if I believed that the action taken in 2021 had been appropriate, and I do.
So ultimately, these soldiers, though, are experiencing a great deal of trauma. Clearly, this has not been resolved in their eyes. Do you not see that as a problem?
I think for any soldier who has experienced trauma, we have a responsibility to provide them with support, and I believe that should be made available and is being made available to them. But your question was not about the trauma that those individuals experienced, but rather
but
how the matter
ultimately them
was
having
dealt
to live with the fact that they further trained and then armed war criminals. That's part of that trauma, and that's part of the investigation that they're asking for.
Well,
And
again,
We're going to have to.
the trauma should be dealt with appropriately, and I agree 100% with that. But I was asked specifically about whether or not the actions that were taken in 2021 when this matter was first brought forward, I think 2 years ago, whether I believe that was appropriate. I have been briefed on that, and I believe it was.
Thank you, Ms. Madison. Mr. Kelly, 5 minutes.
Thank you. Minister, Admiral Topshee said that we may fail to meet our force posture and operational commitments in 2024. So I'll ask you as Minister, will we fail to meet our force posture and operational commitments in 2024?
No, I think Admiral Topshee was outlining concerns about our state of readiness.
He was quite specific.
And he said may. And then so the next question that had to be asked, and I've asked it,
Yep.
is what must we then do in order to ensure that we do not fail to meet our operational readiness commitments?
What is in these? Will cutting $1 billion from the defense budget help us to meet our operational commitments?
And to be absolutely certain, we're not cutting anything from the operational readiness budgets of the Canadian Armed Forces.
Okay.
We're looking at things like professional services, consulting programs, and that does not impact the delivery of those ships, the maintenance of the Halifax fleet, or our recruitment and retention efforts.
Okay, so are there $1 billion in corporate travel and consultants' fees in the department that you're going to cut?
There are. We looked first at professional services. By the way, not all professional services can be cut. It's over $1 billion, and in fact, many of those services are providing maintenance on our bases, health services, et cetera.
So there's $1 billion
No, Mr. Kelly, let me finish the sentence. We're looking very carefully, first of all, at professional services, at consulting fees, at executive travel. And executive travel, just to be clear, I'm talking about any travel that does not involve moving troops to mission, or moving them to training opportunities and things like that. That's necessary, and we're not impacting that in any way. But there is other travel within the Canadian Armed Forces and within the Department of National Defense that where we're looking at, can we find savings if we change the way in which we book that travel, if the number of people traveling or the manner in which they travel can be altered. And so we're looking for savings
Okay.
but we're also looking at a number of other important processes of administration in our procurement, in the way in which we administer our HR systems, our payroll systems.
Okay, let's talk
There are
procurement then.
opportunities for efficiencies, and
Yeah.
I would be surprised if you would be opposed to us finding efficiencies in the way we spend the public's money.
Well, I'm concerned that if after 8 years there is $1 billion in consulting fees that are unnecessary and can be easily cut without affecting operational readiness, will the billion
Not easily cut, but again, my responsibility is to make sure that every dollar we spend, we're producing real value. The Treasury Board was very explicit to us. I want to share this with you, sir. It's important that none of the reductions that the Treasury Board is seeking can impact CAF operations. And I've added my own caveat to that because I don't want it to impact the supports and the services
Okay,
that
well,
we
you're-
provide to members of the Canadian Armed Forces.
Okay, the Chief of Defence Staff would not affirm that this could be done without impacting operational readiness when he was here beside you.
And
2 weeks ago.
he has every responsibility to express his concern, and we're working right alongside him and his team
Okay.
to make sure that we do not
Okay, thank you.
impact on their operational
Thank you.
readiness.
So on last week, you admitted to Global News that there is a serious production problem with ammunition. On September 28th, General Eyre told this committee that no new ammunition production, there has been no increase on ammunition production, particularly 155 millimeter shells since the invasion. I mean, the war in Ukraine has been going since 2014, but the invasion, which is a year and a half ago now, you just told this committee that you have increased the ammunition order by 4 times. Where will this ammunition come from if there is no increase in production?
Yeah, let me just perhaps add a little bit of clarification for you. Earlier this year, National Defense provided $4.3 million to IMT Defense to ramp up their ability to produce M107 155 millimeter projectiles from 3,000 to 5,000 per month. There's also a number of other programs that we're funding: General Dynamics Ordnance and Tactical Systems, almost $2 million towards updating and automation for production of the M795 projectiles. General Dynamics and Ordnance Tactical Systems, an additional $2 million to demonstrate combustible cartridge case manufacturing capability for the 155s. We are significantly investing
Okay, when will the
in
deliveries-
Canadian industry.
When will the deliveries begin?
Well, and as I said today, we've just placed an order for 4 times more ammunition for next year
Okay.
than we were able to receive this year.
Okay, so that's an announcement. When will the delivery occur?
Well, that maybe is a question you want to take some
Well,
time.
we've got
later
him
on
after you're done.
with your thing.
You've got another 25 seconds, so go ahead.
It's been ordered for delivery next year. It'll be delivered next year.
All right.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kelly. Mr. Fillmore, final 5 minutes.
Thanks very much, Chair. Minister, Lieutenant General, Deputy Minister, I think there's an open mic in the room somewhere. It was great to see you at the Halifax International Security Forum last month, where, by the way, you announced funding to stand up Diana. So thank you for that. And those are the 2 things I want to talk about: the Halifax International Security Forum, or HISF, and Diana. Now, having attended HISF for nearly a decade now, I've been able to see firsthand the value that it brings to the world's democracies in addressing and solving the challenges that we all face together. And of course, there's a great benefit to Canada as the host nation and to Halifax as the host city. At the same time, complementary to that is Diana. It's something that, as Mr. Fisher pointed out, it's something that Atlantic Canada wouldn't have even thought was possible a decade or so ago. Our productivity and skilled labor supply lagged behind the rest of the country. And in the past decade, we've seen a huge turnaround. In fact, the Public Policy Forum has called this an explosion of innovation led by a new generation of entrepreneurs. And in fact, our GDP per capita and growth in education attainment has outpaced the national average in Atlantic Canada since 2015. So Diana is the reason that we were successful in our Team Atlantic effort to land Diana in Halifax was because of this change in the ground rules. So here are these 2 important things: HISF and Diana are both going to be voted on in the coming hours, and it's unfortunate that our Conservative colleagues are poised to vote against both of them. And so I'd like to ask all of you, whoever would like to respond, about the value that HISIF brings to the Canadian Armed Forces and our role in the world. And the same question of Diana. What is the importance of the innovation in the defense and peacekeeping space that will come out of Diana? What is important there for our role in the world?
Thanks very much, Andy. And first of all, that was the first time I'd ever had the opportunity to attend the Halifax International Security Forum. It's an extraordinary forum. It was a place of dialogue and exchange, and with international partners. The bilats that I was able to attend with international partners from across Canada and around the world was really quite extraordinary. I think it's an incredibly important forum. I also wanted to acknowledge the members of this committee. We had the largest parliamentary delegation from all parties at the HISIF in the history, the 15-year history of that. And I think the participation of Canadian parliamentarians from all parties is critically important. As part of that, we saw a great delegation from the U.S., but it was matched by an equally great delegation from Canada. And I think that was very important. It is the largest international security forum held in a democratic country to which only democratic countries attend. And I think it did facilitate. It creates an opportunity for a dialogue that can't occur in any other place. It strengthens relationships. It strengthens partnerships. I think it strengthens resolve. We learn from each other. And I think the country and the world is made a safer place, particularly for democracies, as a result of the dialogue that takes place at HISIF. And so I think it's a really valuable thing. And I think Halifax is exactly the right place to put it, by the way. Halifax is, for the Canadian Armed Forces, it's really its birthplace and heartbeat. And in many respects. And I would also echo, I had the opportunity to visit the Irving Shipyard, for example, where we're building our Arctic offshore patrol ships, where we're going to be building the new surface combatant ship. And I got to meet with the workforce there. It's energized, and it's enthusiastic, and it's in exactly the right place. And so situating Diana in Halifax also, I think, makes perfect sense for us. But it's not just an opportunity for Halifax. It's an opportunity for Canada, and it's an opportunity for NATO to continue to be innovative and to attract, new ideas, new approaches. One of the things we've seen with a significantly increasingly dangerous world, we're seeing innovation and we're seeing, new challenges coming from our potential adversaries, particularly Russia and China. The only way we're going to keep up is if we energize and support innovators in free countries. And Diana plays an incredibly important role in that. If I also mention, there was one other thing I got to announce when I was in Halifax, and it's a new $155 million investment in a new training facility for CFP Halifax. That's one of the things when I was out to Halifax and visited with Admiral Topshee. He showed me the training facilities, and he explained the need for us to do more and do better. And so we're now funding the building of a new training facility in Halifax. And again, the right place to do it and the right thing to do.
And thank you to the Halifax Chamber of Commerce once again. Yes, well, you might become a charter member of the Halifax Chamber of Commerce if Mr. Fillmore has his way. With that, colleagues, we'll suspend while we allow the minister to leave, and then we'll re-empanel. I have Ms. Gallant as the first 6-minute.
Thank you. And this, are we going to have testimony first, or we just continue? Okay. D&D is still operating on DRMIS, a 30-year-old program. The replacement system, Defense X, is already an entire year behind. With a budget size upwards of $1 billion, will the Defense X system also be hit with the Liberal cut to the defense budget?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple points on DREAMIS. It is a key system. As we upgrade to Defense X, it will broaden our capability to digitize and will actually be quite key to our transformation we're looking to do across the system in a number of areas. We are looking to rationalize and reduce spending on contracting as part of the reductions. DREAMIS, though, is a critical, or DREAMIS's replacement is a critical project for us in terms of moving forward.
Is it going to still be met within the $1 billion cut?
The work to
Just
identify.
a yes or no,
I can't
Mr. Matthews?
give yes or no, Mr. Chair, because the work to identify the final spending reductions has not yet been completed, so I can't be unequivocal. But Defense X is critical for our transformation.
Okay, so for our CSE representative, welcome. Is there a direct line of communication established when a cyber attack occurs wherein the CSE and the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity alerts the relevant government departments targeted?
Yes, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So yes, CSC works hand in glove with many partners across the nation and as well internationally. And so when a cyber incident becomes known to the Cyber Center, for example, we do make all efforts to be able to contact any victim that may be impacted, whether it's a private stakeholder, critical infrastructure, or a province. We are able to have that direct communication with that organization.
So just this September, a denial of service attack from an Indian hacker group briefly brought down the CAF's main website and House of Commons website for a few hours. This is with a relatively minor cyber attack with nothing stolen, yet speaks volumes on how poorly our cyber system is operating. What has CSE and Cyber Center done since then to reinforce our cybersecurity?
So every department is managed by Shared Services Canada, and so we work hand in glove with Shared Services Canada, as well as the department CIO, as well as Treasury Board, to ensure that the necessary measures are in place to protect from denials of service. Having said that, a denial of service, as you mentioned, was not automatically mean that data is stolen. It is, but we do continue to work with everyone to ensure that the necessary measures are in place to add robustness and rigor to the protection.
Okay, so just this October, a more serious ransomware attack targeted Brookfield, BGRS, and Serva, which are responsible for moving our troops. They stole personal data dating back to 1999. Now, a cyber criminal group known as Lockbit was identified. And Lockbit 3.0 ransomware is up at an increasing severity across the world. How is CSE's Cyber Center responding to this threat that Lockbit poses?
So we're not able to comment directly on any of the incidents we manage, but what I can tell you with regards to BGRS is that we were informed by the company on September 29th of the cyber incident, and we have offered our assistance to be able to help them in any manner we can. After the cyber incident was advised to us, ourselves, along with Treasury Board and many other government departments, are working collectively to ensure that we offer the necessary support to serve a BGRS, but it is now deemed a privacy breach, and that is being led by the Treasury Board Secretariat.
So BGRS moves our military. So it stands to reason that the military would have been notified. But when my office started getting complaints from the people who were supposed to move from point A to point B to be serving them in the military at a specific point in time, called me, that the minister's office didn't know. Why wasn't there that direct link made between the attack and notifying the minister's office?
I don't know if National Defense would like to take that call, but that question. Having said that, the minute we were advised by BGRS is September 29th. And so if the company knew before that, they didn't advise us
That's
before
not what I'm
September
asking.
29th.
I'm asking when CSE advised the Department of the Ministry of National Defense, and is there a time frame, a required time frame between which the time you know and you're supposed to let the related or affected ministry know?
So the minute we know of a cyber incident that could be impacting a department, we advise them immediately.
So the problem is then working from the department hierarchy up the chain to let the minister know.
So if the Cyber Center is made aware, for example, in the case of the BGRS, the minute we would have known, we would have advised. What I'm trying to say to you is that we became aware about the incident by BGRS on September 29th. So the minute we all knew, we took the necessary action to ensure that everybody was made aware.
So there are different attacks on our infrastructure all the time. Now at NORAD, they have the major points of critical infrastructure on their map, and they can see what's happening. Is there a similar sort of real-time awareness, situational awareness, available to the related departments so that when we have hospital after hospital attacked, somebody is putting this together and suggesting that maybe we should find out if the problems with the cloud they're all using. So where does the follow-up begin, or is it just a reporting system and nothing's really investigated and sorted out and enforced?
So just to be clear, the Cyber Center and Communications Security Establishment, in our role, we are an incident responder, but we do provide technical support and technical information protection to the Government of Canada systems. And that means the Government of Canada systems that we manage directly. We are not the ones that protect, for example, the provincial hospitals, for example.
But they report to you when they have a breach.
They may report to us. It's
but not required.
It's not required. It's not automatic. However, because of all the great relationships we do have with critical infrastructure sectors, many of them do work hand in glove with us and report to us all the various incidents that may happen.
I'm sure that we would like to carry this conversation on, but we're not going to. So with that, Madame Lambropoulos, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here with us today. I'm going to stick to the issue of culture and culture change, the much-needed culture change that that we have at the Canadian Armed Forces. The StatCan report StatCan released its report based on the 2022 survey. And found that 3.5% of CAF personnel were either sexually assaulted by another military member in the workplace or outside of the workplace. And this was a significant increase since 2018, when only 1.6% reported being sexually assaulted. The majority of victims said that they did not report the assaults to authorities because they felt that it wouldn't make a difference. And so I'd like to know, because we've heard from you on several occasions, and it's been told to us that it has been addressed. I'd like to know what exactly it means to say that it's being addressed when the victims themselves feel that it won't make a difference. Has this not been told to CAF members as a whole? That it's not acceptable and that there will be consequences if someone is found guilty of doing something like this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. And let me say before I respond to your question directly that the results of the survey are of great concern to us, and we take it very, very seriously. And it's really important to us that we actually get these results from the StatsCan survey, because it helps to shape and inform our way forward, and it's a way in which we can continue the transparency that we need to have to be able to move forward in this particular area and to create the change in culture going forward. When it comes to reporting, it's really it's a complex and I would say quite a personal issue for the many different members who are involved. And while we have been working to create many different ways for people to report, either through the Canadian Human Rights Commission, to their chain of command, through the elimination of the requirement for them to report on themselves from the duty to report perspective, or to go to the police. We still have more work to do in creating ways and opportunities for people to feel safe coming forward. And the part of the report that spoke about reprisals and the concern about reprisals was of great concern to us, because that is completely unacceptable and will counter the work that we're doing to make avenues of reporting available to members if they feel that there are consequences. So this is something that we're taking very seriously, that we have to work on, and we need to actually go through the stats and the details of what we're seeing in that report. It's got a lot of detail for us to really get at identifying what are those next steps and the next things that we need to do. This is a long-term process, but we are committed to that process, and we'll continue to be as transparent as we can, and publishing this report publicly is very important to us.
Thank you. In that same report, 1/3 of the victims said that they believed the perpetrator's use of alcohol played a significant role in the assault. And alcohol, as many people see, as a coping mechanism, so which brings us to and so I'm wondering, the issue of people not feeling safe going to see a therapist and the stigma around mental health is an issue. So having them have to go see a therapist is one thing, but are there things that are being implemented in the culture, in the routines that they go through, that is actually addressing a better and safer culture, and that also addresses mental health? Because this may be a way of coming around and not necessarily having people raise their hand to say that they need help, but integrating it into their daily activities. Is there any thought on a way to include that kind of strategy?
So, Mr. Chair, I think I may have missed a part in the middle of your question, so I apologize if I'm not exactly hitting the mark to your question, because we had a bit of delay in transmission there, so I apologize. When it comes to mental health, and when it comes to removing the stigma associated with mental health, it is something that we have to focus on and concentrate. The Deputy Minister and myself are both the co-chairs for mental wellness and mental health within the Department of National Defence and the Canadian Armed Forces, and we know and we hear from the members about the issues and the challenges that are associated with feeling like they can readily access mental health services without stigma attached to it. Now, I understand, Mr. Chair, there was a question around alcohol that started at the question, and I'm not quite sure how it connected to the back end of the question, so I would be happy to address the first part if the member would like to repeat
I just said that there's probably a relationship between alcohol use and mental health issues, and possibly as a coping mechanism. So are there any ways of integrating mental health supports without necessarily singling out members and having them go and get that kind of help themselves? Are there activities in the armed forces or something you can integrate within the daily routines that would also address this mental health issue or improve people's mental health within the forces?
Very briefly, please.
So certainly we have health promotion programs within the Canadian Armed Forces. We have programs called the Road to Mental Wellness, the Road to Mental Health, which are all about seeing and recognizing, and everybody should know it's not about somebody who just may feel like they have challenges. So we try to incorporate that. As we move into holiday periods, for example, we have more promotions around, because we recognize holiday periods can actually be quite challenging for people, and some people with the loneliness and the sense of loss that they may feel in those periods. And so we try to up our representation of promotional discussions around that at certain times of the year. So we do try to incorporate that into our program.
We're going to have to leave the answer there. Madame Normandin, 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. And thank you to our witnesses. My question probably can be answered by one or the other of the witnesses, so I'm not addressing them to a specific person. In a recent report, it was suggested that transfers should be limited. And Brigadier General Tattersall told us that funding all these transfers, processing them, going through the legal aspects, and going through the GRS, which is a contractor for the move, has that all been analyzed at DND as to the cost savings that could be made if there were limited transfers?
So certainly I think we've been examining the impacts of the many transfers that can happen in a person's career as they move from position to gain first the experiences that they need to be able to do their jobs, but also to help them gain new experiences to advance as they move up in rank and responsibility in the Canadian Armed Forces. And certainly I would 100% agree that in the past we often transferred people on a clock, as opposed to based upon requirement to do so. And we've certainly taken the opportunity to not only just question ourselves on that, but we've seen that it's an element of dissatisfaction for members of the Canadian Armed Forces as well. And as we take a look at retention as an important part of our program, not moving people unnecessarily and disrupting their families is something that we have to do. I would say that I've not seen any specific data that looks at what would the financial savings be associated with a reduction in the moves of an X number of percent. I mean, we certainly know the number of moves every year, and if we were to decrease by a certain percentage, it's been much more focused on let's limit the moves and the transfers that are needed for the purposes that are required, and not just because a clock has ticked past and said you've been somewhere for 2 years, time to move on.
Merci beaucoup. Alors, je vous encourage certainement à...
Well, thank you. I certainly encourage you to do a financial analysis of that, because that's often considered to be an irritant. But I see that Mr. Matthews wants to add something. Yes, thank you. With respect to the potential for reducing expenditures, I don't have an analysis, but as has been said, it is important for the development of people, but also, as has been said, it has an impact in terms of finding specialists, doctors, and so on. That is the real impact for us. And if we were to limit that, we might be able to increase our retention figures. Thank you. With respect to budget cuts, a little earlier, we spoke about cuts in contracting out. I'm very aware of the fact that it wouldn't represent necessarily $900 million of the contracting out figure. But my question is this. If you do make this type of cut in contracting, there are some people for certain contracts. To what extent are public servants and the acting military who are in place able to absorb what would be represented by the cuts? Can they do the activities that would have been cut?
La réponse, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chair, the answer is it depends. According to the contract.
Excuse. So when you look at some types of contracting, we can truly consolidate contracts. We're looking at that right now where we have multiple parts of the organization have contracts for similar things. There's absolutely savings to be had by consolidating those. There's other work that truly is optional and maybe we can eliminate. There is indeed the work which the member posed her question on, which must be done, and is there a better way to do it without contractors? In some cases, we think there's potential for civilians to undertake that work, but I think I would also stress that we are in an environment where we are down in numbers on the military side, and we're already asking civilians, where possible, to pick up some of that slack. So I wouldn't hold out a lot of potential there. I think the one thing I should share that our unions have raised with us is, on some occasions, we have effectively contractors who are in the workplace 5 days a week for jobs they think a public servant could do. There's a question about whether that work could be done more efficiently if it was effectively turned back into a public service job, and that's a really interesting question that we're going to look at.
Merci. Alors, je comprends qu'il y a quand même un potentiel assez...
I understand there's a limited potential for financial gain in that area of contracting out. With respect to retention and recruitment, can you give us an idea of what the bottom line is in terms of what has been done? There are increases, there are decreases. Can you give me an overall figure?
So our current projections at this point in time are that we are not yet at the point where we're going to break even this year, if I can make that statement, where we are recruiting as many people as would be leaving through attrition. As you're aware, our efforts in this area have to go across all three areas. We need to attract people, we need to recruit them into the military, and we need to retain them for the period of time that both they are interested in being in the military, but also for the period of time that is effective and allows them to flourish as individuals. And there is attrition is a normal
Unfortunately, we're going to have to
thing.
leave the answer there. I've got clock problems here. 6 minutes, Ms. Matson.
Thank you. I'd actually really like to pick up from where Ms. Lambropoulos was going in terms of mental health conversations and discussions there. So one of my concerns, of course, is that I had actually filed an order paper question, and it started to break down psychiatrists, psychologists, medical professionals, and doctors, social workers, mental health nurses, addiction counselors. And it's, in fact, those services are being provided by Calian, which is a for-profit corporation. They are filling 91% of psychiatrist positions on the base, 34% of total healthcare providers. These bases don't have a single in-house public servant or medical professional dedicated to those mental health services. So when you talk about those programs being offered, ideally it's from that for-profit company, and it's not by specific individuals that are consistently there, seeing patients regularly. It's through these online services or what have you. And ultimately those for-profit companies will do it for profit as their sole first point. So, Mr. Matthews, you had talked about looking at the interesting idea of bringing those services back in-house. It's been pushed a great deal by the union involved, and certainly it's of key concern to what's going on in terms of what we're seeing in terms of the mental health status of CAF and D&D. Could you comment further on what is preventing you, I guess, from actually moving forward?
Thank you for the question. I think a few things. The health services that were summarized by the member in question are a shining example of one of the areas where we should look. There is absolutely a place for these types of contracted health services where there is indeed a surge capacity, a temporary capacity, a shortage of availability of people who are willing to be public servants. Where I think the question gets interesting is if you have the same service day in and day out being offered by a contractor, is it a more efficient model to bring that service in-house? So we will look at it. We don't have data right now, so we're trying to gather some data. We have asked the unions if they have examples to share with us, which I am sure they will. Online services, I'm actually very good with that. That's actually a very useful way to deliver things efficiently. So I think it's a matter of questioning where we've got the contracted resources, is it truly the right model? If it's surge capacity, that's great. If there's people who only want to work part-time and don't want to become public servants under our compensation regime, we'll accept that, but there may be savings there and a way to effectively deliver services more efficiently.
What's your timeline for those studies getting that data?
We haven't got a timeline per se right now, but it's really interesting timing because of the reductions exercise we were talking about earlier. Those reductions ramp up over a 4-year period, so I think that work will be really interesting, both from an efficiency and quality of service perspective, but also from a potential, and potential is the key word here, for savings.
To move on, but sort of in the same vein, I guess, I've repeatedly tried to bring up the issue of the non-public funds workers. 40% of those workers are actually military family members, and they're really quite essential to the defense community, I would argue. Non-public fund workers in Quebec have just adopted a very strong strike mandate. Petawawa's non-public fund workers have received their report from the Public Interest Commission, and they're feeling very undervalued. They are being paid below the federal minimum wage. There's a huge regional imbalance because there is a refusal to adopt a national pay grid. When will your department finally commit to providing that national living wage for all of those NPF workers?
General Allen may have things to add on this front. A couple of things here. Non-public funds workers absolutely provide a critical role on base in terms of the services they offer. There are some agreements in locations that have been recently reached. There's others that are in various stages along the negotiation process, including strike votes, and we will let those run their course. They are not federal public servants, so they're not part of the same compensation benefit regime federal public servants are. I think the only thing I should share, Mr. Chair, is after our last meeting, I did go back and check and ask the question about are any of these individuals in Canada being paid below minimum wage? And the answer I got back was no, that's not the case. So you and I have different information on that front, but I'm happy to if you have more information, I'm happy to take that back.
One of the things that we learned from committee last week from Mr. Chambers, we were talking about the outsourcing of facilities management or maintenance facilities, and again that contracting out of public service jobs. Given the Treasury Board's directive to cut management consulting services, or has been ideally put out there by the minister, can you provide an update for this committee on whether you've signed any follow-up contracts with Deloitte on the real property operations portfolio, and then how much was given to Deloitte through these contracts?
I do not have that information with me, Mr. Chair, but I'm happy to take that back and see if there's an update there. But I have nothing for you today. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Madison. Colleagues, we have 25 minutes worth of questions and less than 20 minutes worth of time, assuming bells start ringing at 5:15. So I'm going to do a 4 minutes everyone and 1 minute, or 1.5 minutes, 1.5 minutes. So with that, Mr. Lloyd, welcome to the committee. 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for coming today. My questions, I guess, will be focused on you, Lieutenant General Allen. It's been said, there's a culture issue in the Canadian Forces, and we've talked about the sexual misconduct, but I want to talk about another side of this culture. And it seems to me that the backbone of any military's performance and competence requires a moral strength that's grounded in a belief in our communities, a belief in our country, a belief in the ability of our forces, and also camaraderie, not only to your fellow soldiers, but to your commanders and to the nation. And do you believe that our government and our military is doing everything that it can do to ensure that those fundamentals to our moral strength are being met in the Canadian Forces?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. And certainly I would say that for us, the values and ethics and the recent, I would say, revitalization of Trusted to Serve, which is the foundation of the ethos and the ethics for the Canadian Armed Forces, I believe it was back in 2022, really is the basis of trust. It is the basis of ethical behavior, and it's obviously the basis of the nature of the environment that we must be in to be able to do the work that we do in our jobs, but for ourselves to be Canadians within the communities that we have going forward. I would say that at a foundational level, when you take a look at bases and wings as distributed as they are around the country, members of the Canadian Armed Forces quickly become members of their community as well. It is working with members of the local community that we engage in sports programs, that we coach each other's kids, and so I think that there's a strong connection between members of the Canadian Armed Forces and the communities that they are in, and therefore the Canadians that they serve going forward. It is important to us in the Canadian Armed Forces that we build strong connections with our communities, because we know that that's an important home for us as we move across from community to community. And so I would say strongly we, within the Canadian Armed Forces at least, think it's important as a basis for us moving forward.
Are we seeing out of this, and I know it's a very recent change, but are we seeing results in terms of increased recruitment and increased retention in the Canadian Forces?
So it is still, I would say, a work in progress as we go forward, but we are building capabilities to, I would say, work towards the culture change that we see as needed. When we think about some of the programs that we've put in place to talk, even just to promote that we actually have to talk about the challenges that we can face, about the ethical circumstances that we can find ourselves in, and what do you do about that? How do you think about it?
Talk about the ethical side. That's been talked about a lot. But what about pride in our country, pride in our Canadian forces? What are we doing to promote that pride in our young people in this country, to inspire them to serve like previous generations have served? What are we doing right now as a government, as a military, to imbue that pride in our communities?
So I would say people join the Canadian Armed Forces for very different reasons. I would tell you that everybody who is in the Canadian Armed Forces feels a really strong sense of service, that feels a sense of the obligation that they have signed up for and what they're doing for their fellow Canadians going forward. But I would tell you that that probably doesn't exist for most people as they're walking into a recruiting center. It's what you find when you get into the Canadian Armed Forces and you start to feel the effects of the missions and the support that you provide. So the first part when it comes to attraction probably is around attracting people to what opportunity offers the Canadian Forces offers to them as they look to a career in the Canadian Armed Forces. And then as they're in the Canadian Armed Forces, they start to feel and see this sense of community and this
what is specifically being done?
We're going to have to leave it there. I'm sorry. Mr. Fillmore, 4 minutes.
Thanks very much, panel. And to answer Mr. Lloyd, one thing that we're doing to create a sense of pride is Halifax International Fleet Week, and I invite you to learn more about that. But today I'd like to talk to you about space, Lieutenant General. In the coming months, this committee will be undertaking a study on space that I was inspired to initiate based on successive years of conversations at Halifax International Security Forum and discussions with industry leaders. And I'm really happy to see just today on the U.S. Department of National Defense's website that Canada participated in the meeting of the Combined Space Operations Initiative Principals Board, or CSPO, in Berlin recently. So I think that is a very positive sign. It seems really clear that maybe not the final frontier, but certainly the next frontier is space in defense policy. And the committee is eager to learn more about how Canada is sort of preparing for this shift, including what's happening with the armed forces and the 3 Canada Space Division. So I wonder if we could take this time that's remaining to talk about how Canada is preparing to sort of occupy the space of space domestically, but also how we're going to be doing that with our international partners as well.
So thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the question. And we all think that space is actually also, and I don't just mean to be punny, the next frontier, but it truly is, as one of the domains, really an area that we need to lean into. I think often, if you don't think about how dependent upon space we are just to live our day-to-day lives, when you check your watch and your GPS and your car drives you where you're going, your reliance on space in your day-to-day functions simply goes past us, over our heads, because it's just become such an integral part of our lives. So in that way, as we talk about space from a military perspective and a reliance on space to be able to achieve military effects going forward, it's so clear that we have to make sure that we are thinking about the use of space, we're thinking about the protection of space, and the protection of our reliance on space assets to be able to execute our military functions going forward, whether it's surveillance of the ground, whether it is timing and precision navigation that you need, that you often get from space, and whether it's understanding the threats that are approaching our shores. Space is a big player in there. But it's not a place that anybody engages in alone. As you said, it is a very strong international community from a military perspective, but also from even just a military perspective, it is closely connected with the commercial industry and space commercial industries. I had a conversation with the commander of Space Command, and we were talking about force development and how do you think about what's the next thing you need and where is space in that. And very much, if you're thinking about things that you want to try to do by yourself in space, you're going to approach it the wrong way. You need to think about where is the space industry going, and how do you try to leverage where the space industry is taking us, and capitalize on that innovation, capitalize on that development, so that we can actually ensure that the military requirements that we have can be leveraged through commercial assets, can be leveraged through engagements with commercial entities, because space is very much managed as an international entity.
Naturally to Diana. That was very nice.
Thank you, Mr. Fillmore. Minute and a half, Madame Normandin.
Thank you very much. Canada promised in 2017 to set up a rapid intervention force to meet the request from the Americans to intervene in Haiti. And we did so perhaps because we parenthetically didn't want to do them. So what's happening with our rapid intervention force?
Since that period of time, there's been no deployment of a rapid intervention force. So really not much more I can say beyond that right now, but there's been no deployment.
Non, je sais qu'il n'y a pas eu de déploiement.
I know really that there was no deployment. It was a promise that was made because it doesn't really exist. But are you going to implement it? Implement it, rather? I would say not. Not quite now.
Instead.
Minute and a half, Ms. Mattson.
Earlier, the minister had talked about, actually, when he was answering, I think, a question from Mr. Bazan about working with GDLS in my riding and ramping up production on the LAVs to send those vehicles to Ukraine. I'd like to hear if you can confirm to us whether GDLS has those vehicles produced, if they're on hand and ready to meet our commitments to Ukraine, and when they will be delivered.
A couple points here, and my colleague Nancy may wish to add in. GDLS continues to produce the vehicles. Ukraine is certainly interested in them, but as are the Canadian Armed Forces. And we are trying to find the balance in terms of what comes off the production line when, in terms of where they go. Because we, this contract was put in place initially as part of a project for the Canadian Army because of the vehicles they needed to do their work. So we have not yet finalized the schedule as to when vehicles will be shipped to Ukraine.
That's interesting because ultimately I believe that there is a delay on your end, not their end.
Well, there's a couple of points that are important here. Number one is the production schedule, and we are working with GDLS to ramp up production or speed up production so we can get vehicles for the Canadian Armed Forces and for Ukraine more quickly. So I expect we'll have news in a month or so in terms of what the rough schedule looks like, but we're still working that through.
Ms. Madison, Mr. Bazan, 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to follow up on some of the comments earlier about funding to Operation Reassurance and funding for Ukraine, just looking at the fiscal fall update, it shows a decline in military assistance to Ukraine. This fiscal year, $816 million. Next year, $318 million. The year after that, $197 million. So the dollars are declining, and that's where I was talking from. So that is either not being there to support Ukraine or just running out of cash and running out of equipment to donate. Same on Operation Reassurance. Money ramps up to 2025 and then drops right down with adjustments in 2027-28 of cutting it by $500 million, a total of $141 billion cut over the next 5 years. So that's coming right out of the government's own numbers. But I want to talk about equipment. We know that the state of repairs on our existing Leopard 2 tanks that are sitting in Canada, the ones that we haven't deployed to Latvia and the ones that I've already donated, but the ones that are sitting here in Canada, that they're sitting in storage, they're barely usable to train on at this point in time. We know that our howitzers that we have left, we donated a dozen or so to Ukraine. The ones that we got left, only about 4 or 5 are operational. So how do we maintain training of our forces when we can't keep our equipment in maintenance and overhaul so that they are usable?
Mr. Chair, maybe I can start, and then I can perhaps turn to my colleague, Ms. Tremblay, as it pertains to questions related to maintenance contracts and the like. Certainly, the member is 100% correct with respect to having equipment to train upon is an important part of force generation. There are ways in which you can. All equipment is not always in use at all the time. And so equipment sharing has been a traditional way in which force generation training has been able to proceed even with less than a one-for-one equipment to unit way forward, but it's not necessarily ideal, and there are probably cost implications that are associated with that. There is also the importance of exercises. There is the importance as that force generation function, and making sure then that the equipment that you have that's ready for exercises or for force employment can also deliver force generation function moving forward.
Training, when I'm hearing from our troops at different bases across this country, the company strength, when you're supposed to be running, 200 soldiers, we're down to 120. Where you're supposed to have, 7 or 8 labs, we're only running 4 or 5 because we don't have enough labs that are usable at this point in time. How do we heard during the Liberal decade of darkness that instead of giving them our troops bullets for training, that to run around and go bang bang. Like, how are we going back to that, or especially with this $1 billion cut that the Liberals have done to our Canadian Armed Forces?
Perhaps I'll let Ms. Tremblay speak to the initiatives to try to improve spare parts and sparing going forward first, and then I can perhaps speak to any of the training elements after that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. What I can say on the sustainment of equipment is that we're working very hard to make sure that we provide the right equipment that is safe and available to the Canadian.
Stop you there before my time runs out. I just want to move the following motion: that the committee report to the House, based on testimony, the state of munitions production and procurement in Canada is abysmal. The state of readiness of the Canadian Armed Forces is declining, and the Canadian Armed Forces possess insufficient quantities of certain munitions. That the committee call on the government to A, reverse the $1 billion budget cut announced by the Liberal government to the Department of National Defence and the Canadian Armed Forces. B, expand munitions production in Canada. C, increase munition exports to Ukraine. And D, support the development of weapons and munitions manufacturing capabilities in Ukraine by Canadian industry.
It's in order. It's a subject matter before the court, and his time has expired.
Here I got copies that we can circulate in both French and English.
So now, Mr. Collins, final 4 minutes. I'm assuming, colleagues, that you'll let me, or you'll allow Mr. Collins, if the bells start ringing, you'll allow Mr. Collins complete his 4 minutes. Thank you.
I've got a motion on the floor.
You've got a motion on the floor, but we're not going to debate it.
It's my right to debate it. It's in order.
Oh, you want? Oh, I'm sorry. You
I
are right.
I didn't give
apologize. Okay. No, I apologize. Yes.
So, Mr. Chair, let me just say this, and I do thank our witnesses for appearing and providing testimony today, along with the minister. But we have heard through a number of our studies now that we have serious problems in procurement. We have serious problems in the production of munitions in this country. I do welcome the announcement by the minister, but whether or not that would, if you want in, you have to move a point of order.
Point of order. I'm just wondering if we can also share it for those that are online, Mr. Chair.
Can you?
Thank you.
The clerk has a copy of it. So I will just keep on explaining behind the conversation here. We've seen 2 reports coming from National Defence, both the performance report from the department and the RUSI report that was done under the Mines program on our Air Force. And then in addition to that, we saw Vice Admiral Topshee's video on the state of readiness of our maritime fleet. And it is deeply concerning, I think, for all of us that our ability to defend Canada, our ability to be a reliable ally under NATO, and to take on any extra roles with the concern around the PRC, their aggressive posture that we're seeing in the Strait of Taiwan, in the South China Sea, especially along the East Thomas Shoal, their interactions with the Philippines, and of course their ongoing aggression towards Japan. We have to be severely concerned that the state of readiness within the Canadian Armed Forces has been undermined. We also know that Ukraine is in the fight of its life, that the conflict continues to drag on, that it has now become fairly entrenched on both sides, and the line is not moving much these days, but every day Ukraine sends forward its soldiers who are sacrificing themselves for the benefit of NATO and the rest of the world as they stand up for freedom and liberty.
The bells are ringing. I have to adjourn this meeting.
Suspend.
No, it's adjourn.
Adjourn.
Yeah, adjourn. Okay, meeting adjourned.